Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining today's Veterinary Services Student Scholar webinar. Please note that all participant lines will be muted until the question and answer portion of the call. At that time, if you'd like to ask a question over the phone, you may do so by pressing #2 on your telephone keypad, and you will hear a notification once your line has been unmuted. I can remind you of how to do so once we get to that portion of the call. You are welcome to submit written questions as well. Please select the Participants menu at the top of your screen and opt to send note to all presenters. If you are logged in using the web-based application, use the Notes tab on the bottom right-hand side of your screen and address your question to all moderators. All questions will be answered during the question and answer session. With that, I'd like to turn the call over to LaWanda Gamble, Director in Management Support Division. LaWanda, please go ahead.
Thank you, Karen, and good afternoon, everyone. I would like to welcome you to the first VS Scholars webinar, highlighting our 1890 Scholars, our Daniel E. Salmon Scholars, our Saul T. Wilson Scholars, and also our newest program, our Tribal Nation Scholars. I was trying to Google something, and what I came up with was young minds are like sponges, and they are looking for the right input of information stimuli to soak it in. We have 6 great speakers today to provide an overview of veterinary services, their respective business units, plus hot topics in VS. I would like to start off with our leadership introductions. We have Dr. Bert Healy, the Associate Deputy Administrator from Veterinary Services. Bert?
Thank you, LaWanda. First, let me give the apologies for Dr. Shear, who's at a meeting today and was unable to attend, but I know he thinks highly of these various programs and is very supportive of the programs and you and yours in each of these programs. So Dr. Shear, again, is our Deputy Administrator, and he also serves 2 roles, the second one being the Chief Veterinary Officer. A Chief Veterinary Officer is the delegate to OIE or the person who, at this time, actually he's left that with Dr. Clifford, but Dr. Shear is our representative to OIE and the person who visits routinely with the other international Chief Veterinary Officers and is in routine communication with Mexico and Canada and our other major trading partners. And then in his role, he's our face of the agency and certainly is the one who goes to Capitol Hill, deals with the bigger picture issues on the congressional side of things, and working on our budget and things of that nature. So for myself, some of you who have been around may have seen in the last couple of weeks some different notices. BrianMcCluskey and I actually just kind of switched positions. I left Spurs and moved into this office, and BrianMcCluskey, who was in this office, just moved into Spurs as the Associate Deputy Administrator there. So there's a slight change in how our structures are set up, but as you can see in the org chart, Veterinary Services is established with 4 primary pillars, and the ADAs for each of those pillars is on the phone, so they'll share with you more detail of what the particular sections do. But just want to kind of give you a general overview. All of it funnels back up through Dr. Shear's office and becomes the face or the voice, if you will, for veterinary services on a broader scale, whether that be reaching out to our state counterparts or reaching out internationally to the other veterinary officers in each of the other countries out there. So thank you, LaWanda, and I'll turn it back to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Bert. I really appreciate it. Next up, we have Dr. BrianMcCluskey, the Associate Deputy Administrator for Surveillance, Preparedness, and Response Services. Brian?
Thanks, LaWanda. Good morning or good afternoon to everybody, depending on where you are in the country. It's great to be with you this morning. As Dr. Healy just pointed out, I'm new to the Associate Deputy Administrator position for Surveillance, Preparedness, and Response Services, or as we call it, SPURS. Just started actually last week in that role, but have kind of come up through veterinary services in my career from the field perspective. Also worked at within the Science, Technology, and Analysis Services group and as Bert pointed out, just spent the last year actually working in the D.C. area at USDA headquarters directly with Dr. Scheer, so great experience. What I was asked to do is just give you a quick overview of what we do in SPURS. You're looking at an organizational chart here, and the top part of it is mostly just the administrative folks that kind of keep us going for sure. And so we'll focus mostly on the boxes that are at the bottom there, and I'd like to start actually with those that are on the far right, so our districts. So we have 6 districts. We've divided the United States into 6 districts. They have a district director, and it's really in the districts that the rubber meets the road, so to speak. We have lots of field veterinary medical officers, animal health technicians, all of the support staff that keep those folks going, that deliver the disease eradication and control programs that veterinary services is responsible for, conduct foreign animal disease investigations, and a big part of what those field folks do is response to emergency events or foreign animal-like events. A great example of that was our highly pathogenic avian influenza outbreak from a couple of years ago, and we've dealt with a couple of smaller of those outbreaks in the past 2 years. And so those field folks are really the folks that deliver those programs very directly to farmers and ranchers and producers across the United States. The boxes are then on the far left side, I guess, the way you're looking at it, our Cattle Health Center, Avian, Swine, Aquatic Animal Health Center, Sheep, Goat, Cervid, and Equine Health Center. These are our commodity health centers. You can see the different species are divided up into those centers. In those centers, we have epidemiologists. We have folks that develop policy. They're led by folks with a lot of expertise in both leadership but also in those commodities. You'll hear from Dr. Hull in a little bit on the hot topics within VS, but certainly some of those hot topics are cattle-related, like tuberculosis, like cattle fever tick eradication program on the southern border in Texas. The Avian, Swine, Aquatic Animal Health Center, certainly there, again, lots of issues, highly pathogenic avian influenza or avian influenza in general. The swine industry has a number of diseases that we're monitoring, but also trying to protect the United States. And aquatic animal health is really an up-and-coming commodity that we're really trying to help grow in the U.S. Sheep, goat, cervid, and equine. Scrapie is the big issue within the sheep and goat industries. We're still trying to eradicate that, but there are some other issues in the sheep and goat industries that we help with. Cervid industry, it's really mostly about chronic wasting disease and tuberculosis. And then an equine health center, or the equine health team, deals with a number of diseases that we're trying to keep out of the United States, pyroplasmosis, contagious equine metritis, but also ones that we have here and are continually trying to control, like equine infectious anemia. The last 3 centers in SPURS, the SPURS Logistics Center, the National Preparedness and Incident Coordination, and the One Health Center, we actually call those our strategy centers. The SPURS Logistics Center is where we house our national veterinary stockpile, and this is equipment, vaccines, personal protective equipment that are kept in a warehouse, but also in very strategic areas around the country that can be delivered quickly when we do have an outbreak of some sort, and keeping all of that up to date where it needs to be, getting it delivered on time, as you can imagine, is a really detailed logistical endeavor, and so that's what Rodney White, our director of that center, does. The next one there, National Preparedness and Incident Coordination Center, run by Dr. Zach, is really where we prepare for incidents and respond to incidents, and a lot of planning going on there. very technical planning, and the events that we've had in the past, like highly pathogenic avian influenza, are really run from that shop from the policy perspective and the management perspective, and then delivered by the. And the last one is the One Health Coordination Center run by Dr. Anelli. This is a very small group right now, really more coordination than delivery because they are small, but very, very important. Their piece on collaborating with our public health counterparts and environmental health counterparts, but also then really try and connect all the dots across veterinary services so that One Health or zoonotic disease incidents are dealt with very effectively. The one other person that I did not mention is in the very top box, Dr. Granger. Dr. Larry Granger is our senior leader who focuses almost exclusively on antimicrobial resistance. Most of you should be aware that that is a critical public health and animal health issue right now, and Dr. Granger provides very high-level oversight of our activities within SPRS, also across all of veterinary services for antimicrobial resistance. So, Lawanda, I think I've probably used up my time. I'm happy to stay on and answer questions later, so I'll pass it over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Brian. I truly appreciate it. Up next, for the National Import-Export Services, we have Dr. Mark Davidson. Mark, are you on mute?
I am, so good afternoon. So I was just waiting for the slide to switch. So.
No worries, thank you.
Yeah. Good afternoon, good morning, like Brian said. Appreciate the opportunity to talk to you all about National Import-Export Services. Within our associate deputy's office, right now our executive director is vacant as Rosemary moved over to SPRS. And then I'm joined in the office by Dr. John Clifford. John is our chief trade representative, so he's our OIE delegate, which is the world animal health standard setting body, and he also focuses on high-level trade priorities for us. Also working within the Associate's office, I have Dr. Lisa Ferguson. She's our Director of Science and Policy, focuses on cross-cutting issues in that arena within NIES and also working with the other units, and rely very heavily on Lisa, and have Ed Arza acting as our Chief of Staff right now. So as we start to look at the units, what do we do within NIES? Kind of got our very broad mission is we work on facilitating the trade, export of animals or animal products. We also safeguard the U.S. from foreign animal diseases, emerging diseases, through the import of animals and animal products. And then finally, we also have another group that I'll talk about first, and that's our Agriculture Select Agent Services. And this is a jointly managed federal program with the Centers of Disease Control, and we ensure that laboratory work, research, the use of select agents, toxins, these are like foot and mouth disease, anthrax, others, occur, that vital work can occur, but can be done in a safe manner. So then as we look at our areas of focus, we have our policy technical side. We have our animal products permitting and negotiation services that Dr. Addis Diab leads. That's involved in both the import and export of products, animal byproducts. So, this could be hides from cattle, egg products, taxidermy products coming into the U.S., all kinds of things. And, a lot of the food products contain some form of animal, either dairy or egg. and we work very closely with other agencies such as the Customs Border Protection, Food and Drug Administration, Food Safety Inspection Services to accomplish these missions. I have Dr. Jack Tanowski. He leads our animals permitting and negotiation services. Again, focus on animals, cattle, horses, swine, semen and embryos, and sets the policy and negotiates trade or technical agreements with countries so that we can export too. We have our International Animal Health Standard Services. This is led by Michael David. Supports the OIE delegate, also helps coordinate international capacity building across VS. We don't do much from that unit. I think like Brian talked with One Health coordinating, it works to coordinate across the U.S. And then our last technical policy area is our Regionalization Evaluation Services led by Joyce Bowen-Hayward. This group works when we have disease outbreaks like hepatitis avian influenza to provide information to foreign countries so that we can either retain markets or limit the restrictions to a county or state level and then work to regain access. But we also evaluate other countries for their disease status to make sure that they could safely import into the U.S. Our three operational areas. We have our service centers. There are 6 of these. They align with the 6 districts in SPRS. They're focused on the export certification. So after an accredited veterinarian has looked at a shipment of cattle or a pet, we review it, make sure it meets our requirements for export and the importing country's requirements, and we endorse that. Say that the federal government agrees with it. We work with companies shipping animal products, byproducts throughout the world the same way. Our director there just retired, and so actually Dr. Roxanne Mullaney is going to be our acting director over the service centers. And right now she's currently overseeing our port services. This includes land border ports as well as air and sea ports. There's a number of ports along the U.S.-Canada border, the U.S.-Mexico border, and then animals ship out of air and sea ports throughout the country. Dr. Renee Olick is going to take on that supervision of that unit as long as the work she's doing with the animal import centers. We've got 2 federal animal import centers, one in New York, one in Florida and Miami. And then we also work with private centers, a large one in Los Angeles. So birds, horses, a lot of horses, they all come in through these centers and can be quarantined until we can examine them and do the necessary testing and say that they are safe to enter the U.S. herd. And then finally, the last unit I want to acknowledge is our administrative services led by Eric Kessler. And they make sure we've got the facilities, the cars, all those things get paid, the important things to help us do our job. So that's an overview, a quick overview of the different areas that we work within and have that important collaboration with all the other units in veterinary services. So, LaWanda, I'll turn it back to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Mark. Next up, we have Dr. Elizabeth Lautner, the Associate Deputy Administrator for Science, Technology, and Analysis Services. So, Beth?
Thanks, LaWanda. Hi, everyone. I appreciate the opportunity to provide a brief overview of the Science, Technology, and Analysis Services area, or as we're referred to, STAS. Our mission area is to really bring forward the science that we need across veterinary services and with our stakeholders to address the animal and public health challenges that we have. We do that through the 3 centers that we have and our Office of Interagency Coordination. And really, if you want to kind of summarize up what's the purpose of our group, it's really to bring science to some of the challenges that we have and really deliver tools for today to address the challenges we have today, but just as importantly, to be looking ahead and proactively anticipate what the challenges are tomorrow and having those tools available in the future. So we're organized, myself as the Associate Deputy Administrator, Sarah Tomlinson is our Executive Director, and we have a scientific leader, Randall Levings, as well. We have, as I mentioned, we have 4 different units, the Center for Veterinary Biologics, the National Veterinary Services Laboratories, the Center for Epidemiology and Animal Health, and our Office of Interagency Coordination. We're located, we have main locations for our groups. The Center for Epidemiology and Animal Health is mostly located in Fort Collins, Colorado. Our National Veterinary Services Laboratories and Center for Veterinary Biologics is located in Ames, Iowa. NVSL, the laboratory, also has a laboratory on the island, in Plum Island, off the coast of New York. And then our Interagency Coordination Office is based out of Riverdale, Maryland. I had sent a handout, and I think, Luanda, some of those got put into slides. Is that right?
Yes.
So, okay, so I'll just walk through these real quickly. Why don't we go to the next one? So I wanted to provide a little bit more information about the 4 units that we have. SIA is our group that really helps with analysis and a variety of different types of scientific tools that are needed. So it performs risk identification. So we have a process to do a global scan around the world to really look at what would be the potential threats on an animal health standpoint to the U.S., and we have a tracking system that monitors those and actually even ranks those threats and looks at if there's mitigations that we need to do to prevent the entry into the U.S. and also performs risk assessments to look at different options that we may want to use for control programs. We have a group that designs surveillance programs, so we have programs for a variety of diseases, pseudorabies, classical swine fever, scrapie, brucellosis, the enteric coronaviruses. So this group helps design surveillance, but then also does the analysis for it. And obviously that results in a large amount of data to manage. We also have GIS systems in this group. Another important area is the economic and epi modeling. We do, like in the high-path avian influenza episode that was mentioned, we modeled different points of introduction and what the spread could be, changing different parameters in those models, as well as looked at the effects of interventions or mitigations. As well as we conduct annual studies of our different commodity groups, annual 5-year studies. We have varying levels of studies we do to really know what the business practices are, as well as do biological monitoring of the commodities. Our Interagency Coordination Office coordinates with other departments such as DOD, our Department of Defense, Department of Homeland Security, Health Services, Environmental Protection Agency. Example of something they've done is help coordinate memorandum of understanding with the Federal Bureau of Investigation in case of an agroterrorism event to make sure that everyone knew what their roles and responsibilities would be. The Center for Veterinary Biologics approves the vaccines that would be used if you've got pets or livestock. They have the responsibility to approve the vaccines for animals, just as FDA approves the vaccines for humans. And this is actually something that was recognized back in 1913, that there is a need to deal with the snake oils out there, and we continue to make sure that these types of products are pure, safe, potent, and effective. We can go to the next slide. The National Veterinary Services Laboratory is the reference laboratory and confirmatory lab for USDA. So it's similar to what CDC would be on the public health side of the reference lab that other laboratories can send samples to confirm a disease of special interest, or if we have a new emerging disease as well. There's 3 laboratories at Ames, Iowa, and 1 laboratory, as I mentioned, off of Plum Island. That Plum Island laboratory will be transferring off of the island in 2023, and will be moving to a facility that's currently being built in Manhattan, Kansas. One of the important things is to be able to keep up with what's going on with animal health, not just in this country, but around the world. we serve as a reference laboratory for more than a dozen diseases, which means we receive samples from around the world, which lets us stay current with what is currently circulating, making sure our diagnostics we use in the U.S. Will continue to be current. We also have collaborating centers with the World Organization for Animal Health, and again, that gives us an opportunity to build relationships around the world that help us understand the world picture. We also oversee the National Animal Health Laboratory Network, which is over 60 labs that do testing on behalf of the federal government. These laboratories are extremely important in the high-path avian influenza situation, over 90,000 samples in the face of the large outbreak that we had. With that, I'll just finish up with the next slide. Some of the things that we're working on as priorities is to have a national list of reportable animal diseases. We're in the rulemaking process for that. We've worked with the SPURS group to develop an emerging animal disease preparedness response plan that really describes as we have new emerging diseases. And I think we all know this from around the world. We can see diseases that we've had in the past reemerge, and we can see brand new diseases. And it's important that we in the U.S. are prepared to deal with new emerging diseases such as the coronavirus, the porcine epidemic diarrhea virus that emerged a few years ago as a new disease in this country. And again, antimicrobial resistance is extremely important for us on the animal health side to do our part in addressing that issue and understanding that issue and the contribution of animal agriculture to that. And last, the only other thing I'd like to mention is our USDA does have a scientific integrity policy, and there has been training that different individuals across veterinary services are doing on scientific integrity and making sure that, as we said, bring the best science forward, and there's strict policies around that. So if you're interested in that, you can search scientific integrity in AgLearn, and there's 2 courses along, but they would be good ones for you to take a look at as you're moving through your career. And with that, I'll turn it back to you, LaWanda. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Beth. Our next presenter is the Associate Deputy Administrator for Program Support Services, Mr. Kevin Richardson. Kevin?
Great. Thanks, LaWanda. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, Saul T. Wilson Scholars, Tribal Nation, Daniel E. Salmon, and the 1890 Scholars. It's good to have everyone together as a group. I'm actually a scholar, a former scholar myself. I came in under the Outstanding Scholar Program, so I'm just thankful that you guys were able to get together and obtain some of the information that we're passing along. Program Support Services, also known as PSS, we're sort of the overhead back-end organization. If you look at any unit or organization, whether you're at a university or you're at a hospital, you typically have administrative offices or an office of administration that provides different type of support, IT, human resources, procurement, those types of activities, and that's what we do in PSS. We provide those administrative services across DS to the various business units. In some cases, we provide that support working with other stakeholders across APHIS. We have about 135 to 140 great administrative and other scientific type professionals in PSS. I'll start from the left box going all the way over to the right. In the first box is the Division of Information Technology, and that is our largest organization within PSS. We have about 75 or so people in DIT, as we call it, and half of the unit provides developing animal health systems for DS. We have our EMRS, our Emergency Management Response System, which was a system used as we were responding to HPI, and that's one of the systems that are responsible for overseeing or working with the other business units that you heard about to manage outbreaks. So they develop those animal health systems. The other part of DIT, or the Division of Information Technology, provides customer support type IT services. You have an issue with your computer, you have an issue with your laptop or your any sort of handheld device, we do have a group there that works in the field and provides that one-on-one user end type services for employees within VS. Moving to the next box, we have our Management Support Division, and that is led by LaWanda Gamble. In DIT, it was led by Tony Branham, but LaWanda is responsible for this program that we're putting on today. She oversees in that group our different recruitment and scholar programs that we provide across VS. So you, as a Daniel Scholar, or if you're a Saul T. Wilson Scholar, it's LaWanda's group that's responsible for overseeing activities for us here in VS. She also has responsibility for various administrative type responsibilities just for PSS and also for the Deputy Administrator's Office where Dr. Healy talked about. She provides HR type support for them, general services, which is providing procurement and different travel type support services for PSS specifically and the Deputy Administrator's Office. One of the key responsibilities LaWanda has in her group is the Professional Development Services activity. They're responsible for providing training courses related to animal health across VS. So we develop courses within that group and provide different training across the different business units and different folks. This is the one group in PSS that has veterinarians. We do have vets within PSS, and they're in that group providing that support across VS. The next box I'll go to, the middle box, is the Planning, Finance, and Strategy Division, and that's led by Carol Tuzinski. That group is key within PSS and across VS for developing our strategy. Where do we want to go in the future as VS? Where do we want to take our workforce in terms of accomplishing the mission? They have that core responsibility, strategic planners, senior management policy analysts, and they develop those strategic direction for VS. There are also our budget and finance folks that are housed within that group. So they're responsible for making sure we get the allocations, the funding that we need within VS, the funding to manage all the programs that we have, and also to execute those funds. So we have about 10 or so people within that group doing strategic planning, also managing our funding within veterinary services. Fourth group is our Writing, Outreach, and Regulatory Division, and that's led by Laura Christensen. There's sort of three primary areas that are responsible for. The first is writing and editing. That group provides services, writing and editing, mostly for our senior staff. There's a lot of things that come down that we receive that we have to respond to, and they develop a lot of those writing products that have to go up to the top to the folks that report to in veterinary services. They're also responsible for developing high-level presentations. When we do speaking events like these, they are responsible for working with the different senior folks across the organization to prepare some of those talking points for us. We have another group within the Writing, Outreach, and Regulatory Division that oversees regulatory affairs, and that's more so for coordinating different things that we have that come down with our Code of Federal Regulations and guidelines within VS. So they're responsible for coordinating across the different business units on different regulatory activities, which also includes FOIA, Freedom of Information Act activities. The last group within that group, which is called WORD, they're responsible for our communications and outreach across VS. There are different things that we work on with stakeholders, different things with developing communications plans, and that group is tasked with providing those services. The fifth and last box is our Workforce Planning and Assessment Division. There are two primary areas that they're responsible for, very key within what we're doing right now, and it kind of correlates to this program, these scholar programs that LaWanda manages, but it's our workforce and succession planning. We in VS really care about ensuring that we provide the right tools for all of you so that as you move up within your careers, as you advance and you learn more of your field, that you can advance to different leadership positions. So that group is responsible for developing different workforce planning modules that we can use to help you grow and move into different positions across veterinary service, or even if you don't stay within veterinary services, get to different positions within APHIS or other organizations. The other piece within that group is the assessment or reviews. We receive funding within VS and to carry out different programs. Well, when we receive funding, we have to implement those programs. And in some cases, we want to take a look at the programs and understand whether those programs are working well. Congress gives us funding, but they don't always give us direction on how we should manage the programs. It's up to us with our expertise. So this group works across VS, working with the different leaders who spoke, and we sometimes want to take a look at programs and see if we can document and look at the as-is, what's being done now, and see if we can make any modifications to what we call the two process. And we map that out, and then we come up with recommendations on things that we can do differently. It's not always doing something better, but it might be something done differently, or in some cases, things stay status quo. So they're responsible for reviews. So that's sort of a layout of the entire organization, PSS. The one thing that I wanted to do, and it's a little bit going off script from just giving an overview of PSS, as I mentioned, I'm a scholar also, and I came into a special program. And I'm glad that you guys had a chance to come together. This is almost like what I would call a cohort. I know it's not a true cohort, but one of the things that I remember when I was a scholar, when I first came in, was I wanted to move into leadership. That was the only thing on my mind as a graduating person coming out of college. And I learned, and I just wanted to share with you that one of the things that I think is key is remembering to master or perfect your craft. And it's important to think about how can I move into leadership, but it's even more important to know your field. I came on board, I started out in labor and employee relations, and eventually I got into staffing and classification. And one of the things that I did in the first couple of years, I had great people that mentored me, but I spent a lot of time learning my field. And in a couple of years, I knew staffing, I knew classification, I knew labor and employee relations, and I knew it so well that I had an audit that was done that went all the way to an organization that was called OPM, the Office of Personnel Management. And it was an audit that was appealed, and it eventually came back and it supported my findings. And the only reason that OPM supported my findings was because I knew my field very well. That catapulted my career, and it was not because I was looking for leadership, but it was because I knew and learned my field. So I say that to all of you. Spend time to master your craft. The leadership will come. If you want to be an EPI, focus on being an EPI. If you're coming in from private sector and you're wrapping up school in a program, take some time to learn about what we do here with regulatory medicine. Other things, if you're coming into being a trade person, learn trade, or even if it's a management analyst, learn your craft, master your craft, perfect your field, and the other opportunities will happen, because it paid off for me. And where I knew my craft and mastered my craft. So just wanted to, and again, let me pass it back to LaWanda, and good luck in your careers.
Great, thank you, Kevin. I would like to thank all of all of the BS Associate Deputy Administrators for taking time out on the call today. I would like to open it up for questions. If you have any questions for any of the presenters thus far, please, I'll turn it back over to Karen to give you instructions.
And as a reminder to the audience, if you'd like to ask a question over the phone, you may do so by pressing #2 on your telephone keypad, and you will hear a notification once your line has been unmuted. If you'd like to submit a note, please select the Participants menu at the top of your screen and opt to send notes to all presenters. If you are logged in using the web-based application, use the Notes tab on the bottom right-hand side of your screen.
Okay, well, we'll move right along. Our next topic is the hot topics in veterinary services. As you've heard thus far, Dr. BrianMcCluskey, the Associate Deputy Administrator for Surveillance, Preparedness, and Response Services, gave a highlight over some of the organizational structure within SPRS. One of those programs is the Cattle Health Center program, in which our next speaker, Dr. Langston Howe, is the director. So, Langston, over to you.
Thank you, Luanda. Hello to everyone. I appreciate the opportunity, as always, to come and speak about the hot topics in veterinary services. To be successful in any organization, you have to be aware not only of what's going on with you, but what's going on with everyone else, right? Because I'm cattle health director, so I'm in charge of the domestic health status of the cattle and bison herds in the United States. So what we do in cattle health will then affect Dr. Davidson's staff in import-export, because in order to get animals out of the United States, you have to know what their health status is for certain diseases. So everything kind of works together. So I would encourage you, as Mr. Richardson stated, know your craft well, but certainly don't stovepipe yourself. Don't limit yourself in as much as you should know what everyone else is doing, just a little bit, just enough so you can get the big picture idea, because that's what's going to be important. So I'm going to give you some of the recent highlights in veterinary services. We have a lot of good stuff going on. Next slide. So our first kind of big happening is on April 25th, 2017. Former Georgia Governor Sonny Perdue became the 31st U.S. Secretary of Agriculture. This is really important, obviously, because in any organization, be it private sector or government, you have to have leadership. You need to know what your message is, what your priorities are. And so we were very happy when the Secretary was announced so that we could kind of proceed with our business and understand what our direction is. So Mr. Perdue is a former farmer, so he grew up in a farm family, an agribusinessman, a veterinarian, which is cool for veterinary services, a state legislator, and as I stated, governor of Georgia. So as part of kind of giving us a sense of direction, he sort of put out 4 pillars, 4 kind of principles that he would like to move forward with the USDA in. The first one is maximizing the ability of our agribusiness persons and our producers to sell food and fiber to feed and clothe the world. He definitely wants to remove obstacles so that U.S. farmers, ranchers, and producers have optimal opportunity in global markets. The second is he understands that food security is national security. So he wants to make sure that he stresses the role of having a safe and secure food supply for not only the citizens of the United States, but also citizens of the world. He wants us to remember that we are stewards of the land. The United States land feeds more than 320 million Americans and countless millions around the globe. So we need to basically return the land in as good or better shape as when we started with it. And of course, customer service. I'm sure you all have heard a lot about customer service. When I started in import-export, before I moved over to SPRS, customer service was really preached to us. So, we are very public-facing, and we need to treat everyone with respect and with dignity, and do all we can to serve the citizens of the United States, because that's what we do. We are public, and we take pride in that. Next slide. So in order to get all of this done, it takes money. So in an environment of sort of shrinking budgets, we have to get creative with how we source our money. So even though we're not really looking at, full-on farm bill activity for a little while now in 2018, we already have a working group that's beginning to look at ways that we can get language put into the farm bill, hopefully. We see this as an opportunity to expand our animal health response capabilities. As you know, we've done a lot of response with the high-path AI outbreak. We're doing some responding as well with cattle fever tick. There are some swine diseases that we've had to respond to, so we're definitely living up to our billing as an emergency response agency. And so we're kind of taking cues from other units and other agencies with the languages that they've managed to get into past farm bills and attempting to tap into that so that we can get continuous and secure supplies of money so that we're ready and able to respond to animal health emergencies as they arise. So we're definitely looking forward to those talks and, again, already preparing to go ahead and engage in those talks. Next slide. Animal disease traceability. It is a veterinary services priority. It's also a priority of our deputy administrator. We've had some great collaboration and cooperation with the cattle industry, and we have enjoyed a high level of support across the country for animal disease traceability. Traceability is very important from an animal health status standpoint. If there is ever a disease of susceptible species that happen to be livestock, the ability to trace animals will help us in our epi investigations to determine, okay, where did these animals originate, where were they transferred to, and so I think High Path definitely kind of knocked a little bit of the rust off of us. It had been a while since we had an animal disease crisis of that scale. And so it kind of got us to thinking about other diseases. If it were, say, foot and mouth disease or some other disease that would probably spread pretty quickly, it would be really great as a foundation of that response to be able to trace animals across the country so that we can get a picture in relation to how the disease is distributed, how it's spread, and that will then in turn allow us to help stamp it out. A byproduct of ADT is that it allows us market access. I'm sure you all heard about the market access for beef to China. China wanted something very specific in the way of animal ID. They basically wanted to know where the animal was born all the way to the point of harvest. So, you know, start to finish. And animal disease traceability then would allow us to say it was born at this farm, it went here to be fed out, it went here to be harvested. And so that's kind of a standard that some countries have in order to facilitate trade. So animal disease status first and primary, because that is our mission, and then also a secondary and equally important result of that is having access to markets that want pretty complete traceability. Next slide. So with ADT, we started out with a framework that was collaborative and intentionally focused on basic aspects. Collaboration is really important. We have found, and it sort of makes sense, that when you let folks in who will be affected by your regulation, by your policy, if you let them in on the ground floor, you allow them to register their ideas, you allow them to give feedback and input, it tends to reduce kind of the surprise and the resistance on the back end because they feel like they had input and you got buy-in from them in the beginning. So this is kind of a model by which we have continued to get rules and policy done. We basically bring in the groups that will be affected. Hey, we're thinking about doing this. What are your thoughts on doing it? And we kind of keep them in the loop along the way. And that's what was done with ADT. We actually are now on the back end of that. And we're continuing to do listening sessions to determine, okay, what has worked, what needs to be smoothed out. And I think that our stakeholders really, really appreciate that. And again, that ties back to the tenet of customer service. We are here to serve the public. And so we want to know what they think about what we're going to do, because ultimately it's going to affect them. So we wanted to focus on education, and so we continue to do outreach. One of our buzzwords now is socialization. We like to get people used to the idea of things that we're trying to roll out so that it's not a surprise, so that we can hear their thoughts. A lot of times, you know, they're great ideas that come from expected and unexpected sources, and so we like to hear from those things, because there's nothing like spending a bunch of time and investing a lot of resources, and then you roll out something, and then you find out that had you listened earlier, you may have been able to switch course and kind of saved yourself some headaches. And so we continue to educate about why ADT is important and continue to kind of move forward in that process. Our data suggests that we've been pretty successful. We have data obtained from over 1,600 trace exercises through a 12-month performance period, and those were done successfully. So it's pretty clear that our partnership with the states is actually bearing some fruit, and ADT is doing well at this stage. Next slide. So what's next for ADT? As I mentioned, we're doing public meetings. You know, we've implemented this part of it. How does it feel? How is it working? Is it practical out in the real world? And then what can we do moving forward to close some gaps? We're working to identify any gaps that may exist, but also to highlight what's actually functioning. We have some things under discussion, like limiting the ID to interstate movement. So if animals move intrastate within a state, we're trying to determine what's necessary there. And we're also looking at some exemptions that may help the speed of commerce continue, like movement from farms and ranches, mostly intrastate. We continue to look at technologies. You know, as you guys know, who are tech savvy, when things first come out, they tend to be pretty expensive. And the industry, obviously, they're businessmen and women, so they have to be conscious of cost. But as technology kind of develops, the cost goes down. So we're looking at, you know, ultra high frequency, low frequency, frequencies in between, what will actually work. It would actually be great to, say, not have to offload cattle at the northern border, or have to offload cattle in certain areas, basically sort of like your easy pass on your car, where you just kind of cruise through a toll station and it reads. I guess the future would be to basically pass the wand, you know, over a truck and have the IDs read in that truck. Sounds kind of futuristic, but I think it would be great, you know, because you could avoid injury that way. The animals wouldn't be stressed. They wouldn't lose weight to market or wherever they're going. And it's just kind of an all-around great situation. And so we're really excited and looking forward to other advances and continuing to wait for those costs to go down so that it's feasible and practical for the producers. So we're definitely looking forward to the future of animal disease traceability in the United States. Next slide. Obviously, this is a goat, but it had nice tags, so we use the goat. On the beef cattle slide, so to avoid the too much too soon factor, I think the consensus was to kind of hold back on feeders right now until we take care of, say, the breeding animals and work out the kinks there. And so, again, it's listening to your stakeholders, listening to your customers, to your state partners, and understanding that we're all in this together, and it takes all of us to make these things work. And so we've kind of held off on feeders until we get the breeding animals worked out for various reasons. And we also, again, need to look at technology, decide upon one or a very small set of IDs that we're going to go with, et cetera. So, again, it's very, very important to be in tune with kind of everything that's going on and be a good listener as well. Next slide. So I'm sure in the news you all heard a lot about the New World screwworm outbreak. This is a very sort of graphic slide, but it was the reality. When New World screwworm was first detected on September 30th, 2016, the key deer were affected, so it's rutting season. Obviously the males are competing, kind of scratching each other up around the antler region, and anytime you have those type injuries and you add screwworm to the mix, you get these type situations. So we worked with our Florida state partners and other agencies to deal with screwworm. We went with the release of sterile flies, which is the best way to sort of break the life cycle. When you have a New World screwworm outbreak, you typically wait for a period of 3 life cycles to eliminate the outbreak and say that you're free. We actually went for 5 life cycles because we wanted to make sure they weren't just dead, but dead. And so that was a successful outbreak response, as have been our high-pass AI responses in poultry. We've had no new cases since January 10th, but we continue to do surveillance just to ensure that nothing else pops up. We did kind of have a little offshoot involving a dog in the Homestead area, but with surveillance that was caught pretty quickly, and we went ahead and made sure that nothing cropped up there. So we're definitely a response agency, and see something, say something certainly applies in our work. It's all about surveillance. Next slide. So New World screwworm is endemic south of the Darien Strait in Panama and on several islands in the Caribbean. Again, they will feed on any warm-blooded animal. We're familiar with our normal flies that will basically eat rotting things. New World screwworm doesn't wait for it to go bad. It will go after, they go after fresh wounds. So our ports and accredited veterinarians certainly serve as our front lines of detection here. So again, see something, say something, always kind of in a surveillance frame of mind, and then definitely ready to respond. There were fortunately no significant trade impacts with this particular outbreak, as we know with our high-path AI outbreak. NIAS, in conjunction with SPURS and everyone else, because we all work as a team, did an amazing job at keeping markets open, and then to ensure that should it happen again, that there was an understanding in place so that we could keep markets open, because again, we want trade to continue and as much as we can, and we want our producers to be able to market around the world with as few roadblocks as possible. So it's part of the great work that we do. Next slide. So the TB brucellosis programs, those programs are in the Cattle Health Commodity Center. Programs have been around for a while, so from time to time, to keep up with what's going on in our current animal health status, we need to look at our rules, our regulations, and our policies. Our national programs have been a success. By OIE standards, we are free of both diseases. We still do have some cases in certain parts of the country, some associated with wildlife reservoirs. with brucellosis, obviously, we have it pretty much cornered into the greater Yellowstone area. So we've done really well. With tuberculosis, we've gone from double-digit prevalence about 100 years ago, now down to several spaces after the decimal point. But with that, we still do have some cases. As with the Scrapie program, when you're moving toward eradicating a disease, it costs more money and takes more resources when you get to those last couple of cases. So we're continuing to work again with our states and our stakeholders to get things done. So we proposed a rule. We're at a point in the rulemaking process where we can't say a whole lot. But again, we started this rule with input from partners and stakeholders, and we have received comments based on the proposed rule that we heard. Some of those comments may indirectly come in our TB summit that is scheduled for July, where we will have all of the entities that the disease affects and that this rulemaking would possibly affect all together, again, to just kind of listen to how things are working, what might work better, and how we can serve them to our best ability moving forward. So we're looking for what happens with the proposed rule, or if we stay with our current requirements. Next slide. So surveillance. Again, you don't find disease if you're not looking. And so we do a lot with surveillance. Since 2003, about 25% of the tuberculosis cases that we've identified have come through slaughter surveillance. From 2003 to 2016, we've had 41 cases identified through traceouts, slaughter, and on-farm. 11 cases in 2017 to date. It seems high, relatively speaking, and in a global context, it's not that much, but it is a bit of a spike. We had, I think, 11 cases a couple of years ago. So we're not panicked, but obviously we are continuing to look for better diagnostics so we can more reliably and efficiently detect disease, and of course always evaluating our surveillance streams so that we know where the disease is and can get to it quickly. Matching DNA from the cases to the ID is really important. When we think about cases, we want to know where they came from, if they're domestic cases here in the U.S. or if they've come from a trading partner. So we've gotten pretty high tech using whole genome sequencing and other genetic tools in order to be really sophisticated about saying this ID matched this animal and the lesion came from this animal, so we have a positive correlation. We're even taking this a step further, looking to see if there are any patterns with breeds as far as having dairy animals or dairy crosses from certain countries that we import from correlating to TB cases. So we're looking to set up a pilot actually to begin looking at the genetics and the breeds behind some of these cases we identified to see if we can draw some correlations there. So we definitely keep up with the times and use all tools available to do our jobs and complete our mission successfully. Next slide. This is a rundown of some of the current states in 2017 and the cases they're in. As you can see, we have various ways that we deal with these cases. Sometimes we just test and remove, so we go in periodically on a regular basis. We test, we remove animals that respond to our tests. This kind of helps preserve the herd. It doesn't completely knock everything out, but it helps us to kind of control disease on a rolling basis. And then sometimes we will use whole herd depopulation if our models determine that testing and removing, it's going to take too long, too much money, too many human resources. We may just decide to go ahead and compensate that producer and just take the entire herd. So it basically depends on severity of the disease and other factors. Next slide. Cattle fever tick, along with tuberculosis, brucellosis, it's another program that is under the Cattle Health Center umbrella. The program was created in 1906, basically to prevent incursion of two species of ticks and the disease agent that they carry, which is babesiosis. So Texas cattle fever, hence our cattle fever tick eradication program title. We have a bunch of new challenges. So like with TB, we have some new challenges. So same disease, different routes of infection and entry. We have multiple pesticide resistance. We have some ticks that are starting to show resistance against acaricides that we have historically used. And kind of like multiple drug-resistant bacteria, where you kind of run out of antibiotics and you have to look for new antibiotics to treat those. We don't want to get to that point with ticks. So we're working to use the pesticides, the acaricides that we have currently properly, so that when we use those, we kill the ticks. We don't kind of just make sick so that they can continue on and possibly develop a resistance. So those are challenges. And then, of course, we have non-native species that we're having to deal with. So historically, we might be more concerned about ticks coming in on cattle from Mexico, and we still do a good job at the border to ensure that the cattle we import don't have ticks. But now we're dealing with wildlife that are not native to the United States, namely nilgai antelope. It's great for big game hunting here in the United States, but they are also very good at carrying ticks, and they travel very wide ranges for very long distances. So they move ticks to areas that other hosts, such as white-tailed deer, probably wouldn't, because whitetails don't range as far as they do. The whitetails we can treat with corn that has ivermectin, which is a pesticide or an acaricide on it, so they're fairly easy to treat. The nilgai, unfortunately, are a little more finicky. They don't eat corn, they browse. We don't know what they really browse or what their habits are. So we're taking advantage of the one behavioral thing that we're sure of. They form latrines. They always do their business kind of in communal spots. And so we're trying to basically ambush them in these spots and have motion sensing sprayers, for example, so that when they go there to do their thing, it detects the motion, it sprays them. So again, we're very out of the box when we do what we do sometimes, very creative, and we're proud of the great minds that we have that think of all these deep things. Next slide. So here's a map. In yellow, we have our quarantine zone, and then we have depicted where we have outbreaks. You'll see that most of them are sort of pushed back at the border of Texas and Mexico. We do have a few outbreaks in our temporary quarantine zone, and then we have one up in Live Oak County that we are working to stamp out. We have it under control, but it got a little bit further north than we are comfortable with. Could have been nilgai antelope because they travel pretty far, and so we're working to go ahead and stamp that out. But we like to keep things within and behind that permanent quarantine zone, and we've been successful largely. Next slide. So there's the picture, the nilgai antelope, pretty interesting creature. They tend to go under fences, around fences. They're very strong. Someone has pointed out they don't like to cross roads, however. So I think that's pretty interesting. But they've proven a challenge for us. So we're attempting to do a census to determine how many there are. I think they started out with a couple pair, maybe 7 or 8 pair, just to kind of populate a certain area so folks could come and hunt without having to go to other countries. And now I think there may be upwards of 1,000 or so. And with that, there are so many animals that can move ticks. So we're having to work on to get the ticks off of them. And again, white-tailed deer are another wildlife carrier of these ticks. Next slide. So we're trying to bring all parties to bear with the wildlife, of course, Department of Interior and Fish and Wildlife, so that we can work with them to assist us in this. Our tick riders, of course, who ride the border, look for stray cattle, and when they round them up, they certainly look to see if there are ticks that were brought across on those cattle. We work with our state partners, the Texas Animal Health Commission, for example. They help administer the security in the quarantine zones, making sure that they keep an eye on animal movements there. And we have a strategic plan with Mexico that will hopefully guide us in dealing with ticks in our trade, as well as dealing with the tick eradication program in Mexico, which we support. Next slide. So again, we have these challenges. We're definitely confident that we will be able to continue to control cattle fever ticks and overcome this latest outbreak. Once we deal with the wildlife reservoirs, continue to monitor pesticide resistance, and of course, continue to secure funding to support our activities. And next slide. So obviously, high path, again, one of the largest animal disease outbreaks in the United States. We have managed to deal with those outbreaks even recently when they've popped up, our most recent issues. And so we're looking at things like indemnity, how to pay producers when we have to take their animals to help control a disease, other forms of compensation, compartmentalization and reporting on the international front with our import-export colleagues, control marketing, et cetera. Next slide. So I guess we can open up for questions. I have to run and do another presentation here soon. So what we can't answer, please direct them to me via email. Again, thank you all for your time this afternoon. We do very noble work. We do work that is essential to our country and the world. So definitely take pride in being a part of the programs that you're in, and we look forward to you being colleagues and serving with us down the line. Thank you.
Thank you, Langston. If there are any specific questions, I'd like to open it up again for all of the presenters that are still on the line. Any questions for our leadership, our VS executive leadership team, that those participants who are on the call? And as Langston mentioned, he was rushing to go to another presentation, so if you had questions for him, please feel free to email him directly. But otherwise, please let us know if you have questions.
And as a reminder to the audience, if you'd like to ask a question over the phone, you may do so by pressing #2 on your telephone keypad, and you will hear a notification once your line has been unmuted. If you'd like to submit a note, please select the Participants menu at the top of your screen and opt to send notes to all presenters. If you are logged in over the web, use the Notes tab on the bottom right-hand side of your screen and address your question to all moderators.
Okay, great. The last presenter that I would just like to turn over to real quick is Karen Martin. She is the Supervisory Employee Program Specialist here within PSS Management Support Division. She has some information of our next round of scholar information. Karen?
Hi, everyone. Yes, we will be having another student webinar, and that's going to be July 19th at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And that webinar for our scholar students is going to focus on the student program itself. We're going to have speakers. The APHES Pathways Program Coordinator is going to speak. We're also going to have a speaker from the Mentor Program. And then myself and the other members of my team will do individual responses on more internal aspects of the programs. We're going to be covering a lot of stuff, and an email invite should go out shortly, and please join us. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Karen. And just a final thank you to all of the presenters and the participants, the permanent employees and our scholars. Just a thank you for making the time. I know the call is a little lengthy, but hopefully you were able to gather a lot of information, made some new contacts, and if you have specific program information, a reminder for the Saul Wilson program, Lynn Chambers is the program manager, and for the 1890, Daniel Salmon and Tribal Nation Initiative, Deirdre Nephew is the program manager. So if you have specific questions, feel free to reach out to either of them, Karen, or myself. Once again, thank you for your commitment and dedication to VS's Student Scholar programs, and I wish you all have a great day.
Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes today's presentation. Thank you to all of our speakers as well as participants for joining us, and you may now disconnect.